It's nice to be here today. I just want to briefly show off before I start, if that's okay with everybody. So I'm going to do this. Oh dear, that was an incoming text message. Anyway, let's try. Hear that?
No alarm. Alarm tab sheet 03. Left world clock tab sheet 3 of 3. 1. 12 a.m. Australia Sydney 107. P1.
If anyone's curious as to what time it is in San Francisco at the moment.
6. 12 a.m. USA San Francisco, California 707.
Okay, now I'll turn that off so I don't spoil the rest of the presentation. I might come back to that a little later on. I came to this conference last year, and you know, it was so interesting. You know, the various types of research in all sorts of areas, from sustainability, pharmaceuticals, technology. But the one thing that I thought was missing was just maybe your perspective from the end user. So whether that end user is the general public or, you know, people in terms of better medical outcomes or whatever. So it's in that context that it's hopefully going to be of interest to add, you know, what I have to say to the conference today. I work for Fighting Blindness. Fighting Blindness is a medical, essentially a medical research charity, although we have in our strapline 3 pillars, which is cure, support and empower. The cure bit is the research bit, so I'll come back to that. The support bit is to support people who are diagnosed with sight loss or blindness and their families, which can be a very devastating piece of news to find out. And the empower bit is very much about the patient role in what we do, and that has always been very important. We were founded by patients, people affected by inherited conditions, so that's increasingly playing an important role in what we do. And I might come back to that a little later as well. But Ronan, I should say actually that using PowerPoint when you can't see is quite a dangerous strategy, but Ronan here has said he will sort of help me, so I'm going to ask him to flick onto a slide. Okay, so it's probably a bit too noisy to be interactive on this piece, which I had hoped to be, but anyone recognize any people there? It's sort of a history lesson as well, by the way. Okay, well, you have photographs there, or so at least my colleague told me, so I hope she wasn't leading me astray. You have James Joyce, the well-known Irish author. You have Eamon de Valera, former Taoiseach and president. Arthur Griffith, also very prominent at the turn of the 20th century. I'll come back to him in a second. Judi Dench, very good, from many movies, and maybe her role in M in James Bond is was one way to remember her. And finally, anyone recognize the last person? Stephen King. Yeah, the author Stephen King. The thing they all have in common actually is that they are or were all affected by quite severe vision loss. It's something that probably isn't really on people's radar, even though they are all very prominent people in their own right. And I think part of that issue just right there is that losing your sight is a very personal and private and sort of embarrassing, as well as being a health issue. I can speak from personal experience. You know, one of the first things that people losing their sight feel is actually a deep sense of embarrassment, because you get yourself into all sorts of awkward situations, very hard to explain, you know, that you walk past somebody on the street and didn't say hello to them, that somebody waved at you from across the street and you didn't wave back, that you sort of just walked into a lamppost. I mean, you just find yourself in all sorts of awkward situations, and I think most people's natural reactions is to just keep a low profile, keep your head down, aside from the fact that until relatively recently there was relatively little that could be done anyway, so you know, you were working on accepting your situation rather than fighting against it. I just wanted to mention Arthur Griffith actually, because somebody just read this to me out of the newspaper earlier this week, that having been very prominent in Irish history in the turn of the 20th century, he was sort of absent from the whole 1916 rising, which is very contemporary because, you know, this is the centenary, as we all know. And apparently, or so the story in the Irish Times said anyway, apparently the reason was that he really couldn't see very well. So to hand him a gun and tell him to shoot at somebody in the opposition, they all figured out wasn't the clever thing to do. So he was pretty much sidelined. That's one of the stories anyway. And you know, that was very interesting to me because I never knew that before. But anyway, can we flick on to another picture? Anyone recognize that person? Much more contemporary for the younger people in the audience. That's Jason Smith, double Paralympic gold medalist. He was actually on the Late Late Show last Friday night. A great example, I suppose, of somebody, you know, achieving everything you could possibly achieve while living with severe vision loss. But in some ways, I suppose, you know, a great inspiration, but not a good example because unfortunately we all can't run as fast as he can. So that's another indication of, say, who. I'm focusing here on the who is affected by sight loss. Okay, so this is who's affected by sight loss in Ireland, and that's not a misprint, by the way. 224,000 people. That's very hard. That's almost 250,000 people. It's very hard for people to imagine that, you know, could it be that high? Even sometimes ourselves in Fighting Blindness, we wonder, did somebody get the survey or research wrong? It's actually true, and again it comes back to this point of a lot of older people living with a condition called age-related macular degeneration. A lot of, you know, as I said earlier, people who just sort of maybe slide off the radar of actively participating in society. 224,000 people, 1 in 10 people over 50 affected by age-related macular degeneration. I bet even in this room, a lot of you know of, all right, I'm facing the wrong direction. A lot of people, you know, just sort of sliding off the radar because they're diagnosed with some sight issues, so maybe giving up work and, you know, not necessarily out and about on the streets every day. 1 in 10 people over 50. 5,000 people affected by inherited conditions causing sight loss, which is how Fighting Blindness was founded first, because people and families came together 30 years ago, realizing that there had been generations of inherited sight loss in their families, and nothing known about it. Like, not only was it not a treatment or cure, but actually nothing even known about it. And the cost to the exchequer, and this is just in health costs, €69 million a year. And that's just in health costs. But if you try and factor in the cost of the social welfare costs, people on disability benefit, people on blind pension, the lack of contribution to the exchequer in the high rates of unemployment, you know, even other parts of the health sector, like for example, you know, surveys have shown that people affected by blindness are 8 times more likely to be affected by depression, 3 times more likely over 50 to be affected by a fall or a broken hip. So, you know, the costs really escalate. And similar to a contribution made by the Irish Cancer Society that I attended earlier, these figures are predicted to grow, mainly because we're actually all living to be older. So that was the problem. Moving on to the action, you know, what are Fighting Blindness doing, or what have we been trying to do? Well, specifically in relation to today's conference, investment in research, you know, it's so important. I showed you my phone at the start, reading out the time to me. By the way, if please don't tell any of my blind or visually impaired friends that I'm still using an old non-smartphone, because they've all moved on and I haven't. But like research, just in technology, you know, the ability for people who are visually impaired to access the world through technology is extraordinary, and that's come from research. Specifically in relation to what Fighting Blindness does, we've invested 15 million euro in over 70 research projects in Ireland in the last 30 years. UCD, Trinity College, Waterford Institute of Technology, Queen's University, Belfast, and some of that, and our role has been very much to seed fund research. It's giving those grants of 50,000 or 100,000 euro that get an idea up the ladder a little bit, and our hope and our desire is that if the research turns out to be promising, it will move into commercial development. Other funders will take it on. We actually have a really good news story over the years at Waterford Institute of Technology where we seed-funded research into blindness at a critical point, and they've gone on to leverage that into multiple millions of euro of funding. We don't care, to be honest with you. We have no great ego or propriety attached to it, as long as it moves the whole issue of research and the development of treatments forward. Other things, I'm trying to think actually of the other things that are on the slide, but in terms of moving into results and where we are now, it is such an exciting time. I was diagnosed with my condition over 20 years ago. For the first 10 of those years, it was a sort of hit and hope situation, so let's invest money in research, see what we find out. 1989, scientists in Trinity College discovered the first gene responsible for a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. Since then, it has just snowballed. It is just extraordinary. If we got a researcher into this room right now, they would have to talk very fast for a half an hour and wouldn't be able to actually cover all the progress that has been made. Forward, we're facing a whole set of new problems, which is where people probably in this room come in, the clever sort of developers of technology and commercial development, into all sorts of areas like clinical trials, which we hadn't thought about 10 years ago, like patient involvement in clinical trials, like commercial development, like the cost of drugs. We've seen it in recent years with a drug for cystic fibrosis that was discovered, costs like €250,000 a pop. So we're facing down the barrel of that gun in terms of treatments and potential treatments. But we have to believe that as these things move on, other solutions will come along that will help to solve the problems that we're facing into now, and some of the ones we haven't even thought about yet. So from my point of view, and the other thing I suppose to say too, from Fighting Blindness point of view, is we raise this money through fundraising. So we're not given, we have a small amount of government funding, but mostly it's fundraising. It's people trying to get money to put into something that will benefit them down the line. So it's just another aspect of where the money comes from, and hopefully we're adding, as I say, we definitely have skin in the game on this one, so hopefully it's helping to move things along. In summary, I just want to say that it's a very, the issue of sight loss and blindness, I think, is relatively unknown, or maybe not fully understood. It's going to become a bigger issue with an aging population, but I think investing in research and innovation, including technology, including medical research, is going for sure to get things across the line. And whereas, and I'll make a personal declaration here now, just because I've been thinking about it recently, but I'm 50, so maybe there won't be a treatment in my lifetime for me, because it's often easier to prevent these things than or treat them rather than restore them. But